Hi, everybody. It's Jim Ostrowski with the Liberty Moving Podcast. It's been several months since I did one. I've been busy with the day job, basically. And I'm just wondering, has anything interesting happened since I did the last podcast? Not really, because really all that happened is that the government got a lot bigger. And people who want more liberty spend a lot of time and energy on electoral politics, and it failed. So really what happened in the last 3 months is basically what happened in the last 50 years. So, but I want to talk today. I want to get the podcast back going. And I have some thoughts on Twitter and social media and other things and maybe a little football. So uh, my podcast today is entitled Thank You, Twitter. I have a completely different view of Twitter's recent actions than most people not on the political left. Sadly, there is not a good term for such people. Non-leftist is clunky, but I'm working on it. Not only do I think Twitter has every right to ban anyone from its platform for political reasons, but I actually applaud them for using a strategy that I've been urging the Liberty Movement to use for over 20 years, direct citizen action. The Liberty Movement has largely ignored me, so this current controversy is a good opportunity to make my pitch once again. What exactly is the issue here? How do we best accomplish political change? There are logically four possible answers. One, do nothing, because everything is hopeless, because human nature is bad, and people will screw everything up one way or another, regardless of political systems or ideas or policies. That is a perfectly plausible and respectable argument, but it effectively removes you from the debate altogether, so let's reject that option. Second, the most common approach is conventional political actions such as voting, lobbying, supporting candidates, and filing lawsuits. If you look closely at conventional political tactics, they all appear to have one thing in common. You are trying to convince other people to do something to achieve a desirable political goal. Thus, I like to refer to conventional politics as indirect action or indirect citizen action. There are many problems with indirect citizen action, too many to list here, but I've covered most of them in my books. I liken voting, for example, to trying to stop a hurricane with your breath. Conventional tactics don't work for average citizens because politics is rigged. The state was founded and is controlled by an organized political class that features extreme military discipline, made possible by unity of purpose, to seize control of the state and use it to advance their power and wealth at our expense. The political class controls the courts, so it is usually pointless to go to court to sue the political class since they are the ones who put the judges on the bench. There's an old saying, a federal judge is a lawyer whose best friend is a senator. Elections are rigged since the political class monetizes its control over the government to create a slush fund to greatly outspend challengers and beat them like a gong in elections. Lobbying by ordinary citizens is pointless since the legislators are installed by the political class and must do the bidding of wealthy special interest groups that have already paid them off with campaign donations and other factors such as future considerations. Theory aside, can we all agree that conventional political tactics have utterly failed in the Liberty Movement since its birth around 1972 to the present? Let's talk about the third option in politics. I call it direct citizen action. Here, unlike in conventional politics, where the individual is always trying to get someone else to do something to accomplish a desired goal, he decides to do something himself to achieve that goal. My prime example was the subject of my first book out of 5 on this subject. If you think government schools are bad for your kids, you can waste 40 years trying to reform them, as we've done, indirect action. Or you could simply take your kids out of those awful places and solve the problem once and for all. Probably the most important form of direct citizen action you can take is voting with your feet, choosing to live in a state, county, and town where you can, simply by moving, cast a deciding vote for more liberty, less taxes, and fewer regulations. This is no surprise the subject of one of my main projects, which I call Liberty Moving. Sounds familiar. There are many other examples, and I will list some of them in a moment. My point is, having been heavily involved in conventional politics for 45 years, believe it or not, don't I look young? And seen their massive failure and analyzing and explaining the structural problems with it, I have been urging the liberty movement for over 20 years through 5 books to drastically shift towards direct citizen action and away from electoral politics, and I have been largely ignored. Now, leadership in this area comes from an unlikely source, Twitter and the other social media companies. They show us the path forward. Each is using its own property to advance its own political goals. This is quite libertarian, and we need to respect their right to do so and applaud their strategic brilliance. They are exercising the right of free disassociation, a core libertarian principle. They also illustrate a core principle of Austrian economics. Value is subjective. You may ask why Twitter chose to lose money to advance a political goal. Easy. Human beings act to advance not their monetary profit, but their subjective profit, of which monetary profit is simply one factor. What Twitter did is the same as me choosing to go to a more expensive diner because my neighbor's daughter works there, and I like helping my neighbors. Economic value is subjective, so there's nothing violative of free market principles in proposing boycotts, ostracism, or disassociation based on political motives. We can thank Twitter for firmly establishing the legal and moral principle that any business can refuse to serve any customer solely because they disagree with that person's political views. A beautiful and useful principle. Thank you, Twitter. For years, libertarians ignored my exhortation to use direct action. I think, however, this is the perfect time to renew my calls. In a few days, Washington will be controlled by the most anti-libertarian group of people who have ever held power in America. Plus, all of our opponents have one way or another apparently read direct citizen action and adopted my ideas, albeit to destroy liberty, not to advance it. I was talking about kicking people out of diners long before Antifa started to do it. Of course, I meant doing so lawfully. So politics is rigged, and our opponents are now using the tactics I have proposed in my books. The liberty movement now has no choice but to stop ignoring my advice and do the same. If we don't, we will be in very deep trouble very fast, and I think you know what I mean. Let me touch on the fourth option in politics, violence. I reject this option without hesitation. Violence is the shtick of our opponents. It's exactly what we oppose. Violence is a failure of the imagination. The American people hold the keys to their own jail cells right between their ears. Violence is unnecessary. The American people will be free at the precise moment they choose to reject the big government of the last 100 years, and not a moment sooner. This is a war of ideas, and ideas are bulletproof. Assuming we had a violent uprising, since 90% of Americans love big government, some other form of big government would be reinstated immediately. And since the folks who tend to end up on top in civil wars tend to be the meanest and most ruthless and the baddest, it will probably be worse than what we have now. So we will have incurred the cost of civil war with zero or negative benefit. Finally, violence is stupid, since literally dozens of viable, peaceful, legal, direct citizen action options are available to fight big government. To sum up, we have 4 possible approaches to political change. Do nothing, continue to use conventional political tactics that don't work, engage in pointless violence, or start using direct action strategies that have worked in history and will work again if only they are tried. As for Twitter, there are plenty of direct action tactics that could be used against them. These include leaving the site, not advertising on the site, selling your stock, joining competing services, starting your own service, using other forms of communication, or boycotting their advertisers. There is zero reason to make government much more powerful by handing over its control of social media to a bunch of corrupt politicians and incompetent bureaucrats. It would be a disaster. And notice the Freudian slip. No critics of Twitter, to my knowledge, have proposed a bill to regulate them. The devil is in the details, and we have no details. Let me give you some examples of direct citizen action. I'm not going to go into detail here or even make the case for them. I've done that in 5 books. But I get asked all the time, what can I do? So let's go through some of these ideas. Don't worry about the details or execution. I'm going to be spending the entire year explaining in detail what to do, why we should do it, and how we're going to do it. In Government Schools Are Bad for Your Kids, 2008, I proposed the most important direct citizen action possible, taking your kids out of government school. In Direct Citizen Action, 2010, I set forth a long list of direct action as follows, including convincing states and localities to stop cooperating with the federal government, the 10th Amendment movement, pledging allegiance to the principles of the American Revolution. If you don't know what you believe in, you can't accomplish the goal. I'm not urging you to do anything illegal or violent. Just come to the realization that you no longer give any moral sanction or moral support to the corrupt kleptocracy on the Potomac. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. This is the critical first step from which all else follows. Withdrawing moral support for the regime is critical, since public support is the very basis of the regime's power. We need to educate ourselves before we can educate others. We need to study the history and principles of the American Revolution. We need to study war and peace. War is the health of the state. We need to study economics. Start making more patriots. Begin with your family and friends, then coworkers, customers, clients, neighbors, and members of your church or gym. If fitness is your religion. Use the Betsy Ross flag to symbolize our movement. Our adversaries have their symbols, and we need to have better ones. This idea has already gained many supporters since I first proposed it 10 years ago. Vote with your dollars. Stop buying things from business firms that fund the political machine and fund the corporate state and fund big government. If we have 10% of the population on our side, we probably have 25% of all small business. Small business owners are natural libertarians. Buy from patriots. It is time for restaurant and tavern owners to get politically active. This would be merely reviving an old American tradition. During the First Revolution, taverns were vital meeting places for the revolutionaries and served as the nerve centers of the revolt. Vote with your feet. If you live in a state that lacks the freedom you need to pursue the American dream, it may be time to vote with your feet and, in effect, cast that deciding vote for more liberty. Be a knowledgeable juror. Talk a little bit more about that in a second. Ostracize politicians. Imagine a politician walking into the local diner. The owner comes up and says, "Joe, I don't know how to break this to you, but my customers don't want you in here. You will have to leave." This is what Antifa is doing to our side. And I wrote about this 10 years ago. Wouldn't it be nice to see signs and bumper stickers pop up across America that say, "Politician-free zone"? Politician-free zone. They're excluding us from various zones at the moment. Let's do the same to them. Why not? Don't be a sap and always fight your opponents with their weapons of choice at the time and place of their choosing. Make these degenerate creeps fight on your own terms and on your own battlefield. Surprise them. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Minimize your contacts with government. If you want smaller government, start acting like you mean it. Don't run off to this or that government agency whenever you have a problem. Start being self-reliant. Seek out private sector solutions to your problems wherever possible. Avoid contacts with the government, especially the federal, state, and county governments. Don't buy lottery tickets. You are just giving the politicians more money to build their machines. You want to gamble? Buy stocks. When you give charitable donations, reward organizations that refuse to take government money. There's one in Buffalo. I won't mention the name. I don't want to get them in trouble, but I've contributed to them. You need to be armed. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. If money is not an issue, you should have several weapons: a handgun, a shotgun, and a rifle. Know how to use them. Know the laws on self-defense. We only use defense. It's our enemies that are aggressive in everything they do. We are the side of peace. That's why my avatar is a dove with an olive branch. Be prepared to join a neighborhood militia. A militia in a republic is simply each able-bodied citizen armed and prepared at a moment's notice to defend the republic against external or internal threats. You are already a member of the militia. Your only choice is whether to be ready, willing, and able to do your duty. In times of unrest, we will need the militia to prevent a collapse into complete chaos. Militias organized by town, county, and state can provide order and defend against any organized threats. When will it be time for local militias to swing into action to defend the people from tyranny? I am on record opposing any illegal or violent tactics against the bellicose kleptocracy on the Potomac. At this point, such tactics merely evidence a failure of the imagination. We can beat these scoundrels with a lethal weapon between our ears. That's the point of my books. Yet things are getting dicey, and patriots should understand in advance when we will need to take the fight to a different level. This will always be a judgment call, but here's some general guidelines. A good rule of thumb, and listen to this. When strange men in strange uniforms come into your neighborhood and start abusing innocent civilians, consider that your Paul Revere wake-up call. The Redcoats are here. The Redcoats are here. Another good rule: you should probably resist tyranny before they put you in a concentration camp or knock on your door in the middle of the night. Here's some specific criteria on when active resistance to tyranny is called for. It is good to broadcast these guidelines to alert patriots to act, but also to put potential dictators on notice that this or that violation of the Constitution will trigger immediate and massive resistance. Let's all be clear on this well in advance. Here's my list. Mass confiscation of firearms. Mass arrests without probable cause. Any crackdown on free speech, press, or assembly. Martial law, other than during an invasion by a foreign army. Prohibition of homeschooling or private schools. House-to-house searches or routine roadblocks and checkpoints. At some point, you have to say enough is enough, but never fire the first shot. The feds have made a career of manipulating their foes into firing the first shot and then claiming the moral high ground. Any active resistance must be strictly confined within the bounds of just war principles. It must be defensive only, proportional to the attack, and must avoid harming innocent third parties. And here's the pledge I referred to earlier. I pledge allegiance to the principles of the American Revolution, stated by Jefferson, and for which the Minutemen and Washington's Army fought. That government's only purpose is to protect our natural rights to life, liberty, and property. That any government that does more then that, to protect our natural rights, must thereby violate those same rights and become a tyranny that the people have the right to alter or abolish. I pledge to resist that tyranny by peaceful means, if at all possible. Now, my next book, Progressivism, continued to refine the direct action concept. Progressivism was a strategic leap forward because it actually describes the mindset that America is stuck in, progressivism, and showed that it was irrational and not based on fact or logic. The book proposed several additional tactics beyond those described in direct citizen action. They included talking to progressives, explain why progressivism is bad even for progressives, explaining why government employment is bad for those who take those jobs. Talk to Christian progressives and explain why progressivism is inconsistent with Christianity. This is a major fallacy that they have. Educate people on free market economics. Discourage people from working for the federal government. Form your own leadership cell for liberty. I called for a general strike associated with a series of specific practical demands for change. And then I wrote a short monograph, Revive the Liberty Movement, based on a speech I gave in 2019. Now, here's a couple of those ideas. Expose the three mindsets that people use to block out the truth about liberty versus the state: progressivism, leftism, and archism, the subject of a future book. Explain to people that the state is a constant generator of conflict. Hello? What do you think's going on right now? Who do you think caused all this conflict? The free market encourages cooperation. Explain how the language of politics is deceptive and corrupt and helps keep people uninformed and enthralled to the state. Reach out to groups largely ignored by the movement, such as blacks, and support their efforts to gain greater control over their lives, communities, and neighborhoods, instead of blaming them for their own problems when they lack such control. Which group has suffered more from big government, being ruled by strangers in distant capitals, than black people have? They should be our natural allies. Be able to explain liberty in simple, clear terms. For example, people get along in the marketplace, but not in the government place. Always attack. You can't win anything playing defense. And I'm not talking about war here, just for the dunderheads, the government agents who might review this video. I'm talking about argumentation. What I think I have shown here is that for 50 years, we've been talking to walls, human walls with mental force fields, namely progressivism, leftism, and archism, that are entirely irrational and based purely on emotion. So we have two choices: spend another 50 years talking to mental walls and impenetrable force fields as if we were speaking to our fellow countrymen in a foreign language, or for the first time ever in the movement, we could confront, expose our adversaries as irrational, emotion-driven advocates of caveman politics. Finally, in the Second Amendment Works 2020, I further refined several direct action concepts, including being an educated juror. Grand jurors do not have to indict. Grand jurors do not have to indict. Pass it on. You're going to use that information in the coming months in the new administration we have. Don't have to indict your fellow citizens for imaginary crimes, but you're never told that by the prosecutors or judges. Form alliances with groups that we don't normally talk to, such as the Me Too movement. And finally, arm yourself and be prepared to resist tyranny if necessary, as I've already mentioned. The book proves that widespread civilian gun ownership deters tyranny and does so peacefully. Read the book. It's $4 to $6. It's free on Steve Filano's great website, 2anys.com. So I hope I've given you the flavor of just some of the kinds of direct action strategies that are available. I will be rolling out more tactics this year, and we'll be promoting the existing ideas much more aggressively as well. Big surprise for you all in hopefully February coming up. We owe Twitter our sincere thanks for waking us up to the new reality that political wars will now be fought and won primarily through direct citizen action. And when we think it through, the liberty movement will realize that this is a war we can win for a change. A couple more minutes here. I don't like to do long podcasts, but I didn't want to break this up. So, ladies and gentlemen, Twitter just dunked on you. The ball is in your court. To quote the greatest speech of all time, Al Pacino, on any given Sunday. I don't know what to say, really. 3 minutes to the biggest battle of our professional lives. All comes down to today. Either we heal as a team, or we are going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We are in hell now, gentlemen. Believe me. And we can stay here and get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. Now, I can't do it for you. I'm too old. I look around and I see the young faces and I think, I made every wrong choice a middle-aged man could make. I pissed away all my money, believe it or not. I chased off anyone who ever loved me. And lately, I can't even stand the face I see in the mirror. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. That's part of life, but you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out that life is just a game of inches. So is football, because in either game, life or football, the margin of error is so small, 1/2 step too late or too early, you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow or too fast, and you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They are in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone around us to pieces for that inch. We claw with our fingernails for that inch, because we know that when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing, between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it is the guy who is willing to die who is going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it is because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. The 6 inches in front of your face. Now, I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you, look into his eyes. Now, I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's a team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team or we will die as individuals. That's football, guys. That's all it is. Now, what are you going to do? What are you going to do?